Hello there. Very nice to meet you. I'm Ines Zhou. I'm a recent PhD of comparative literature from the University of California, Santa Barbara. I'm now also a research fellow at the Interdisciplinary Humanities Center at the university. Generally speaking, I'm a person working on poetry, ecopoetics, and waste studies. And I'm actually recording from São Paulo, Brazil, where I'm doing research right now here. So I also chose to use more tropical elements in my presentation. Here we go. This clip from João Pedro Rodrigues, the ornithologist, shows the way we look into other beings. Looking around, the bird suddenly seems to notice the existence of the camera. The ornithologist undoes the binoculars in the film and looks into them. Paradox exists every time we intrude our lens into the world of another being, be it wild or not. The most observant picture through camera also includes the hidden dominating power, the aestheticization of the precarious, the erroneous projection of human narratives, and the varied cost and footprint behind the making of photographs or films. The Antelope's Gaze by Percy Shelley, a quote favored by Tim Morton, is still problematically anthropocentric, though it at an early age adopts the antelope's perspective of the world with conscience and aesthetic capacity that is less anthropomorphic. The doubt toward animal consciousness and aesthetic capacity has dwindled with the ever-increasing discovery of their proofs. Theoretical speculation and literary imagination have been contemplating on the question of how to think, to feel, to exist like another being or thing. And perhaps all of us, at some point, have wondered at how the creatures we encounter look back at us and think about us. Ecomedia is apt and powerful to witness truths across time and space, and to present the hyperobjects and the infinitesimals. In today's world, conveying the idea of climate change, mass destruction, and mass extinction becomes unthinkable without documentary intervention and visual presentation. Film's adaptability to assume other than human perspectives has been approached in documentaries like George Furtado's Isle of Flowers, which follows the journey of tomatoes from plantation to landfill, or in Rami Barami's Plastic Bag, which tells the life story of a plastic bag. Admiring approaches as they are, on the cinematic level, the shots still present the tomato and the plastic bag as objects from a third-person POV. We see their life rather than experiencing it. Coming to my presentation, from the title you could see diverse topics which make the talk more like a sketchy brainstorming of ideas than an in-depth analysis of a particular case. By combining the kilo eye and the animal eye, my proposal here is simple: to ask the question how we could use our camera lens and existing cinematic techniques for non-human perspectives, and further, to embody ourselves in non-human bodies. I'd invite you to notice that the use of the collective we as human species here is mainly out of explanatory convenience. Still using one of the human languages and the man-made techniques, how would we explore beyond the human-non-human dichotomy and use our physical faculty to acknowledge and see the experiential world of the other and becoming with other beings? We is always a fuzzy concept when we try to identify with the other and sometimes to disown and transgress our human identity. Though this endeavor, as many zoomorphic and anthropomorphic stories have shown, can be itself paradoxical and often problematic. I look with optimism still into the potential of the simulated non-human vision at which our current media techniques excel in different ways, with more ways yet to explore. The cases I selected here are recent films, more or less mainstream, that have, at some point, tried to take the perspective of a corporeal other to watch back at humans and the human world. By no means being inclusive, I see them as four representative models, each of its own idiosyncrasy, in observing our narrative strategies to tell ecological stories, and each pointing to a thematically intriguing field. In The Ornithologist, while Antonio was observing the birds through his binoculars, his own body was also observed, seen from above, reduced into a tiny spot, through the tilted, obscured bird-eye view, by the flying eagle or the stork that looks back. The Brazilian anthropologist Eduardo Viveiros de Castro's Cannibal Metaphysics may offer a pertinent theory for the topic in discussion. From the indigenous American people's cosmopolitical view, the universe is inhabited by diverse types of actant subjective agents, human or otherwise. Gods, animals, the dead, plants, meteorological phenomena, and often objects or artifacts as well. The interspecific resemblance includes the same mode of a perception. Animal and other non-human having a soul see themselves as persons and therefore are persons. The human being sees himself as what he is. The loon, the snake, the jaguar, and the mother of smallpox, however, see him as a tapir or a pecker to be killed. In seeing us as non-humans, animals and spirits regard themselves, their own species, as human. They perceive themselves as or become anthropomorphical beings. They perceive their food as human food. In the article Queer Ecology, Morton discusses from the traditional Occidental context that queer ecological ethics might regard beings as people even when they aren't people. But let us not forget the subtitle of one of his recent books, Solidarity with Non-Human People. These ideas that redefine the concept of persons or non-human people become the base of multinaturalism in the Amerindian ontology viewed from different perspectives that lead to the perspectivism of the co-inhabited world. At the same time, as the axiom from the Indian god Vishnu says, no embodied being can escape Maya, the Sanskrit concept of the illusion of our sensuous perception and all our experiences of the world, which also underlies the concept of reincarnation and the embodiment as a sentient subject. Then the question leaves to multimedia, our art of illusion. How can our camera capture the multinatural world rather than just this all-too-human world? Can our definition of eco-media go further to be more inclusive of this intersectional, interrelated, perspectivist witness? The non-human gaze, when given an eye by the lens, absorbs our disembodied empathy with another subjective POV, while objectifying human bodies and estranging human behaviors. How much can we identify with the non-human, and how essentially queer is that, as it effectively involves the queering of our bodies? Turning to our first case, Finding Dory, let's watch one of the most memorable moments in the film when Dory and Hank, the octopus, encounter the raid of the kids' hands in the Monterey Bay Aquarium. Finding Dory came out after Jack Halberstam termed the Pixar genre in the queer after failure for the prevailing theme of transformed revolt, often from animals or animated things, in CGI animation that made children's film a covert hotbed for some of the most revolutionary social ideas. Hyperstem emphasizes the overt connection between communitarian revolt and queer embodiment, and the rethinking of embodiment in social relations through this genre. Finding Dory continues the animals' outsmarting of humans and the regulating human system in their collaborative and often creative work for subjective goals and freedom. It is a step further in realizing the generic potential of Pixelworld in its inherent affinity with ecological thinking. As Morton also claims that ecology is queer theory, and queer theory is ecology. In Finding Dory, with its depiction of the ocean ecosystem, the anthropomorphized story is less anthropocentric. To elaborate on Vivero's de Castro, it is the fish people in encounter with the human people, and the two natural worlds collided. What's most remarkable of this scene is that in this children's film, children themselves, often idealized as more empathetic and communicable to other beings or queerer, become the mischievous villain in the story. Their innocent yet malicious play becomes a terrifying event for the fish people. Their hands messing around the sea animals, shot from their underwater perspectives, shows the terrible things we have inadvertently done to others. What would be the function of this scene to its children audience? Next, I feel compelled to include Darren Aronofsky's Mother last year to think about ecomedia and non-human perspectives. For one thing, using the genre of house horror as a bait, it rather faithfully enacts one particular idea of ecofilm, eco in its etymological sense as oikos, meaning the household. Our environment is our dwelling place. Using the allegorical method, a somewhat outdated rhetoric considered by some, the film was enabled to embody the deep time and the planetary scale. Again, embodiment in the most literal sense, in the story of a single female character, a concrete housewife. For another thing, Aronofsky's tactful and intentionally disquieting narrative lies in its gradual overthrowing of the audience's own sense of justifiedness and identification with the host and hostess. In the first part of the story, it tests our own psychological limit of hospitality. How much can we sacrifice for others, seeming to insinuate other social issues at stake? As the story goes on, as the metaphor unravels, it is we ourselves that have become the rude and insatiable guests, embroiled in chaotic, reduced human affairs. It is we ourselves being watched by the hostess all the time. With ecofeminism at its core, the film's overfocus and close-ups on the mother's movement, complexion, eyes, and subjective views call for the viewer's sympathy, as the film's subjective camera and the POV reverse angles were also highly praised by Scorsese. In the mother's visceral connection with the house, it also invokes a visceral connection from us with something larger than us. Just as a children's film subverts children, a generic subversion continues here. How much can we look back at ourselves from the mother's eyes? Juan Pedro Rodriguez's Ornithologist pertains to the quintessential queer cinema. When the ornithologist, the man who watches birds, entered the forest, he became the subject of constant gaze from different birds and spirit embodied in birds from various angles. Under Rodriguez's inventive and experimental bird view shots, the ornithologist was caught in a web of bird visions and bird worlds. In the constant alternation of shot and reverse shot to and fro between Antonio and the birds, the human world and the bird world got interlaced and optically dialogued, as if still more polyphonic narrative silently lies beyond the plot of humans. Antonio, upon entering and being exposed to the multinatural forest, step by step underwent events of vulnerability, dispossession, humiliation, homoerotic desire, violence, and death driving willingly getting rid of his social and physical identity, and then death led to metamorphosis. At the end, the spiritual bird and the male lover were also indistinguishably fused in the resuscitated birdman in the religious mysticism and the suburban campness. It is in the bird's reverse watch over the vulnerable body of the ornithologist a cinematic queer ecology is realized. Lastly, speaking of embodiment, virtual reality could be the most advanced media technique that lets us to be immersed in the other scenario. Starting from the same year as the release of Finding Dory and the Ornithologist, Animal is a project of a series of VR films that shows the watcher the reality of the cows, the pigs, and the birds in factory farms in 360-degree VR film. The result could be disturbing and overwhelming because it shows what we generally try to forget in order not to be disturbed. To give you an idea and to invite you to challenge yourself by watching them, I included a less graphic 360-degree scene in a pig factory farm. As Danfeng Dennis recently talked on Big Think about how VR can show us life, death, and the consequences we are blind to, and how VR can dissolve your ego and unlock your empathy. VR film has become a growing genre to tell ecological stories, to lead us to the frontier scenes of ecological catastrophes, the melting ice, the bleaching reefs, and the daily realities that different animals face. By virtually having the body of and becoming a pig people, a cow people, and a bird people, seeing the surrounding peers and looking at the human deeds, VR momentarily removes our own bodies and connects us with the body of the other, thus connects us with the other's life and world momentarily in our disconnected life and restricted perspective. The influence of Animal as one of the most successful campaigns in animal rights activism and veganism is also powerful and growing. If ecological stories are to be told and to be effective, the ability to connect with the other is at the core. Finally, to recap these preliminary ideas of mine on the potentials of non-human perspectives in ecomedia, we have the fisheye view, through which a subtle radicalness of pixel vault meets environmentalism for children, the bird-eye view, through which queer physicality and vulnerability are exposed to and exchanged with the forest habitats, the pig-eye view, through which animal rights activism incorporated VR to excite empathy at another experiential level, and also the earth-eye view, as a catchline in the trailer of Mother says, "Seeing is believing."